I was just
Uh,
talking to producer Tom. So,
no problem. All right. So, everybody, today my guest is Chad Pytel. And Chad is a first developer, then a founder and a CEO of thoughtbot, which is a team of expert design and development consultants. They bring web and mobile products from validation to success. And they are based in New York, Boston, San Francisco, London, Austin, and North Carolina. And Chad is also the host of the Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots podcast, which is a great name for a podcast, I must say. So, welcome, Chad. Thank you very much for being here.
thanks for having me.
Yes, so maybe we can start kind of with your background. So
Mhm.
you're obviously a developer. So when did you decide maybe to start an agency? Because I know a ton of developers freelance, and that step from freelancing into becoming an agency owner is very tough for some of them because they tend to code and love the coding part of it. So how did you develop that shift, or how did that
Mhm.
transition happen?
Yeah, and you're right. I had been freelancing. Actually, I started freelancing when I was in high school because it was pretty early on with the web, and so I got a lot of opportunity. Most companies were creating their first website ever when I was in high school, and so got a lot of opportunity to learn a lot and help a lot of people, and then continued to freelance all throughout going to college. And when I was in college, I was one of after graduation, one of the first people in my sort of cohort of friends and people that I had done projects with to get a job and needed to build a tech team. And so ended up hiring a lot of the people that I had worked with in school, four of them. And we went to work for this startup that very, very, very quickly failed.
Mhm.
And the experience of working for that failed startup had really, really burnt us out. um, but we learned a lot, and one of the things we learned was we liked working together. And so I wasn't in the mindset of like wanting to go out and do job interviews and explain what we had just been through and that sort of thing, but I did was able to fall back on the freelancing. And I said, look, if I could make some calls and we could get some clients, would we all want to keep on working together? And they all said yes. And so it was through that group of friends that I made the transition, and that experience that I made the transition from working as a freelancer to starting an agency.
Got it. And just for people who are listening, how big is the agency at the moment, maybe employee wise?
Yeah, we're just about 115 people across the 6 cities.
So you started with maybe like a small group of freelancers, let's say below 10, and that slowly grew to those numbers. So what sort of services were you providing in the beginning uh, of that journey, maybe?
Well, in the beginning, I made those phone calls and back to previous clients is a big
Mhm.
part of it. And what I often heard on the phone call was, well, we don't need our website done. You already did that. We don't have anything, but we'd love to work with you again. You're a computer person, right? Can you help us set up a computer or our network? Or we're having this problem with Microsoft Word. Can you help us with that?
Mhm.
And in those early days, we didn't want to turn away any work. So
Mhm.
we said yes. And so what we found ourselves doing was really everything under the sun that someone would pay us to do with computers. And we put a nice name on it. We said, okay, if that's the reality, then we're going to call ourselves a full service IT consulting company for small and medium sized businesses. We'll set up networks and computers as well as build web um, and mobile solutions. Um, but it may not be so surprising in retrospect, but by doing everything for everybody and not having a strong voice about who we were and what we provided to clients, we were pretty mediocre in terms of the two things that I consider to be success, which is financially successful, but also doing work we actually liked to do. And so we were not financially successful, and we were spending all of our time doing work we didn't really like.
Mhm.
And that took us we started in 2003. In 2005, we hit the first important turning point of the company, and that was when three of the original five founders decided that they were just going to go get regular jobs. And that act of needing to or consciously deciding to stick with it when our friends had just shown us we could walk away, no harm done. We didn't have a lot to lose. It could have gone either way, but the two of us decided to stick with it. And at the same time, that idea of we've got nothing to lose. Our friends just showed us we have nothing to lose. So why are we spending time doing things we don't want to be doing in the ways that we don't want to do them? We literally took out a piece of paper and we wrote down a list of here's what we want to do and here's what we don't want to do. And we started saying no to work that didn't fit on that list. And
Hmm.
that was the first turning point. And the important lesson that I learned there is, there's so many companies out in the world that do what we all do. And if you don't have an opinion, if you don't have a voice about who you are and what you do for clients, then they're never going to find you. There's too many options in the world for who they can work with. And so, fortunately, the things that were on that list did differentiate us. Like, it was the early days of test driven development. We said we do test driven development. And so, it sounds counterintuitive because there's so many companies in the market who don't do test driven development. But by putting on ourselves on the short list of companies that do, the companies that believed in test driven development, we were one of the only companies that they could go to and know we believe in this thing and this company is going to do it for us.
Hmm. Got it. So I'm wondering what you think about this, because there's a ton of founders who listen and then they start off very generic, offering anything they can, and
Yeah.
then they get to the point where they need to niche down. But then again, let's say because I have an agency and we only build mobile apps. Let's say if I would just say that native
Hmm.
mobile apps. But then there comes a point where somebody says, "Oh, we need data scientists. Can you provide us that? Can you do some sort of analytics for us? Can you do something different?" And there comes a point, I think, where you kind of grow even past the niche you picked originally. And then when maybe have you reached that point? Because, or how did that work out? Because it's always people say you have to pick a niche, but at some point then again you can't just stay with one technology stack forever, because those things change. I see some software houses named like we're just doing React Native or we're just doing that, and they'll have to rebrand after some time, obviously. So what do you think about those things?
Yeah. The important thing that I remember is we didn't choose a particular technology stack because we thought that it was going to be popular. We chose it, and we didn't make any of the choices we made because we thought they were going to be popular. We
Hmm.
made them because as designers and developers, we were more fulfilled when we used them, and they were the right tool for the job, the best tool that we knew of for the job.
Hmm.
And so I'm not too hung up on what exactly we use as tech stack or that kind of thing, as long as we stay true to those ideals. So over time, the things that are going to use will necessarily grow or change or that kind of thing. But it's about building the best products that we know how in the best way that we know how, being the most fulfilled while doing it. So when something else comes along, we're evaluating it through that lens rather than do we think this is going to be successful.
Hmm.
And so for something like data engineering, that would be a case where, like, do we have people on our team that care about it and are fulfilled by it and want to do it and can do it in a way that is authentic to who we are? Then okay, yeah. And is it the right tool for the job? Okay, yeah. But if it's not, then you start forcing it in ways that are not authentic to who you are as a company, and that causes you to spread yourself thin and essentially become mediocre.
Right. So it seems that you have core beliefs, and then that, let's say, test-driven development was not really
Hmm.
about that. It was about the other client believing in the same thing, which then makes it that much easier to sell or just make business, because if they believe in the same thing, it's definitely an easier relationship than if they don't. So how do you
Yeah.
define those beliefs? Like, because I'm doing this right now, it's very hard. We are only 30 people, so we're not at your size, but how do I kind of create a belief system, or like things not based on tech stack or all those things, but based on something that is like true value and that
Yeah.
can move us forward? Do you have like recipe for that, or should we just make a list like you did, like this is what we want to do, this is what we don't want to do?
It's it you're you, you I can tell you're facing this problem for real, because it's a real problem. And we hit upon it accidentally because the tech stacks and the choices that we made were the right ones. And so what I used to say is like, we lucked out because the list of things that we put down were a proxy for the underlying values that we had. And so we used to call them principles. And then over the years, we said like, okay, great, test-driven development, but what was the underlying values that caused us to choose that in the first place? Ruby on Rails was another one. We were the first consulting company in the world to switch to Ruby on Rails in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Great, but what were the underlying values that caused us to do that in the first place? And so we've refined our list to be based on beliefs and values rather than specific technologies now. And we arrived at it at that way. So it might be that you could do the same thing, that you could actually not worry too much about the underlying values, but instead just choose what you think is right, what is most fulfilling to you, and what you think is the right tool for the job, and then live with that. And then over time, extract what are the underlying values that are inherent in those choices that we were making, sort of like without thinking about it too much. That's the path we took. I don't know whether it would work for somebody else, but that's the path we took.
I think it's very crucial, especially like we're based in Prague. There's thousands of agencies in just one city over here.
Yeah.
And they all do the same thing, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
enough to be just tech driven, because that doesn't differentiate you. And especially in this kind of business, it's all about relationships. Majority of deals comes through like the referrals, right? So it's those beliefs I think are crucial. And so we do have like ideal customer profile set up. But I think it kind of just talks about the specific types of businesses we want to work with, but not really the
Mm-hmm.
core beliefs. So I think we need to kind of work on that, because that will essentially determine. And most clients don't even care about tech stack. Like they don't
That's
even
right.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in fact, our ideal clients have never cared about tech stack. Our
Mhm.
ideal clients, we're going to be most fulfilled in our work when we're the ones making all of the choices so that we have agency over our work. One of our
Right.
values is fulfillment. And so we know we'll be more fulfilled if we're the ones making in the driver's seat. So our ideal clients don't actually care about tech stack at all.
Right. And now you're hitting on something interesting, because most agencies actually get into a deal structure or sales process very late. So they get into the
Mm-hmm.
process once they are already evaluating the tech stack, or once there's a specification written. They just need like an agency to execute something. And so that's already too late. So how do you make sure that when you want to become like a premium agency and want to be in those like making those decisions, how do you start a relationship with somebody? Because most agencies, especially from a marketing standpoint, they just want like leads right now who have a project ready. But I don't think that's a good mindset. I think a majority of the marketplace is not gonna decide on software development right now. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
process they started months ago maybe. So how do you get in those relationships early? How do you build the trust with clients, maybe even if they don't have a project right now,
Yeah.
but maybe down the line, you'll be the first one who they think about?
So there are two aspects to this at thoughtbot that I know have been big factors for us. So we have never just been a development company. We've always been an integrated design and development
Mm-hmm.
company. And the majority of what we do is help people go from concept to launch of a new idea. And that has been very important to us, being as far forward in the conversation as possible. And we're not, by being not just a development company, we're not getting people after they've already gone from concept to, okay, we're ready to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Customers are coming to us saying, I've got this idea, and we help them refine that idea using design thinking, using design, doing graphic design, as well as user interviews and all of that, taking it to the point where then we are going to start development on it. So that's been critical to being involved in the forefront of the conversation. The other aspect of it is sharing as much as possible about how we work and what we believe about how successful products are built and designed. And so we've published all of how we work in a playbook, which you can read at thoughtbot.com/playbook. And we have a quite popular blog where we blog a lot about this stuff, and we created a lot of open source around the tech stacks that we used. Particularly being so early on with Rails, we got a lot
Hmm.
of opportunity to do Rails. So what happens when just sort of everyone in the community is aware of who thoughtbot is, in the design and development community, I should say, a lot of people are aware. And so maybe the non-technical founder or the someone who's at a company says, okay, we have this need, or we're doing this new thing, or we're having trouble scaling this, who can help us? We're top of mind because they're reading our blog, they're reading that book, they've modeled the way that their company works off of some things in the playbook.
Hmm.
We hear from companies all the time that say, you know, here's we've built a lot of what we've done off of how you talk about it in the playbook, and then they're using our open source, so they already know that the code that we write is high quality and solves real problems that people have. It's been a study that over 75% of all Rails applications have at least one of our open source packages in them.
Hmm.
So that's just tremendous for our reputation and allowing people to find us, for us to be on sort of what I call the short list.
Right. So you're building thought leadership through podcasting, through content, and it's not about, it's about kind of making yourself as a part of a brand awareness, right? So you're
Yeah.
making yourself um, known in the industry, as well as design. We do the same thing. We have design in-house as well. I get companies who separate those things, but then
Mhm.
it's so hard for a software development company then to stand out. It's like almost impossible, especially those who just focus on backend. They don't even do front end. It's like that's so hard to do. If you
Yeah.
don't have like huge government contracts or something, it's like
Mhm.
very hard business. I think
I
so.
think I think so, yeah. The way I think about it is, and you mentioned this before, how have we made our business work in a world where outsourcing is such a big thing?
Mhm.
I think in terms of like what's commodity, like what can you hire anybody to do? And if you can hire anybody to do this, you should not be hiring thoughtbot. So a big part of the way that we work is geographically um, centering in local studios, working with local
Mhm.
clients. So by default, then, someone who is considering that they could find another agency anywhere to work on this is not an ideal client for us. The ideal clients for us are people who say, we can't, for whatever reason, we can't work with anybody anywhere to do this. We want to work with someone locally.
Mhm.
So we've specialized in that. There's nothing inherently wrong with remote work, but there is a customer base who, for whatever reason, doesn't work that way. And same thing with development. We've always pushed ourselves to be on the forefront of what it means to build products in the best way possible, because we know that there's a lot of people. That's not what people hire. Just to write code is not what people hire thoughtbot to do. And so we've got to continually move forward in our practices and what we do, so that the people who have hard problems that haven't been solved before, that's who we service. If you can find anybody to solve the problem, if it's sort of like a commodity problem, then we're way too expensive, and there's probably someone else that you should work with.
Got it. Yeah, I have the same approach. We're planning to open an office in London, but I plan to hire like local people there as well
Hmm.
to make it more effective. Um, but what sort of kind of services do you provide at the moment in terms of web, maybe in mobile development, or what are kind of your core services at the moment?
We have two. I mentioned the concept to launch of a new idea.
Hmm.
That makes up the majority of the number of projects that we work on. And those can be web or mobile. We don't, a lot of customers come to us with an idea and they think that it's going to be a mobile app or whatever. And we work to really validate to make sure that that's the right approach. Um, and in terms of tech stack that we use, the majority of those applications now are a React Native mobile app with a Rails backend.
Hmm.
We do other things, but that is the majority. We actually, if 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 the only concerns were technical for a client, we ourselves would be more fulfilled not using React Native. We would prefer to build iOS apps in Swift and Android apps in Kotlin. But everything's not equal. You need to balance the needs of the business and the time to market and the overall budget. And
Mhm.
React Native hits a certain bar for what we're proud to say is an app that we built, in terms of user experience and performance and that kind of thing, while being able to deliver in a cross-platform way, which is cheaper and faster.
Right.
So for startups, that's the typical approach, and we're going from concept to launch, with we do a design sprint, a validated prototype that we then go on to fully design and build, and that service, everything we do launches within 12 weeks in that service. Most things launch in the 6 to 8 week mark, and then continue to iterate for a few. We do weekly iterations, so a few iterations beyond that.
Hmm.
Along the way, we're not just writing code and doing design. We're teaching our customers how to do this, how to be product managers, how to validate ideas and prioritize a backlog and ship within a window. And we're teaching them how to do that. And so many startups or larger companies who want to do something new report that, like, oh, we came to you for design and development, but the most valuable thing we got was learning how to do what you do.
Hmm.
um, and so that's a big part. That's one of the services that we provide. The other service that we provide is for companies that already have a product. So maybe they've achieved product market fit and they are now scaling, or maybe they launched 10 years ago and their design is 10 years old and they need to do that. Maybe they're scaling a lot, but they lack senior talent. They need mentorship, they need best practices. So they come to us because we're on that short list of companies that are in their mind. They know how to do it and they do it really well.
Hmm.
Let's go to thoughtbot to help with these problems that we have. And so that's more of an augmenting an existing team, an existing product, and taking it to the next level. So companies like Harry's and Groupon, um, Etsy, those are the kinds of clients where um, we're doing that kind of work for.
Hmm. And so you've mentioned that you're actually teaching your clients or sharing everything along the way. So do you
Yeah,
specifically charge for that separately, or do you make it as part of your deal?
it's just part of the ongoing work that we're doing together. Yeah.
Got it. And so overall, do you prefer to charge your clients? I guess it depends if it's a startup or if it's like a unicorn, but do you prefer to charge based on time and material, or do you prefer to go with a fixed price project, or do you have some sort of value-based pricing going on? How how do you go about that?
The way that we do it is we bill by the week. So it is time,
Hmm.
but it's not down to the hour. It's just everyone at Thoughtbot works on one client project at a time, and they're giving their full effort in the week to that client. So we do weekly invoicing, and we don't start a project,
Hmm.
particularly those concept to launch projects. We don't start a project before we have an estimate for how long it's going to be, and that establishes a budget and a timeline. And so we're very good at launching within that budget and timeline that's been established. So I think it's a nice balance between, clients want to know how much is this going to cost me and how long is it going to take. They're essentially asking for
Hmm.
fixed bid, but it's not in anybody's interest, including the clients, to actually have a fixed bid uh, project. The incentives are not set up for actually successfully launching something of the right quality on that timeline when you have a fixed bid project. Um, the best thing to do is align incentives so everyone is flexing scope rather than time and money. um, and so by adjusting things that way, I think it's a nice balance where we've set up some bounds on time and money, but the thing that we're all working to do is launch a great product within that time and money, and we're all collaborating on what the scope of that's going to be.
Got it. So the scope changes as you go, or do you kind of?
It does, but it changes in response to what we're learning, not,
Mhm.
oh, we've run out of time, so we got to, cut this feature. So all the conversations we're having are couched in like, that's a great idea, or this is a thing that we've learned, but here's what we can do within the time that we've set aside, um, and what we had expected. And it keeps the conversations that we're having very collaborative with our clients.
Right. So let's say the budget that you present to them in the beginning, it's just like a rough estimate with some deadlines, and then you can adjust as you go as well.
Yeah, yeah. And there are times where it's like that something is uncovered, and then we can proactively say, this is great, now we've learned this. Do we tackle it now or do we tackle it later? And there's not on a fixed bid project, what ends up happening from our side, clients will try to put it something like that in the scope of the previous budget. And what happens when, from the client side, the downside to doing that is you end up uh, not building a good product is essentially what it comes down to. And not to mention the fact that then you could end up in an adversarial relationship with the people that you're working with, in terms of like, they're on the hook for working for free basically, and that's never gonna end well. But just in general, we found that once we started working like this, the products that we created were better. We went from like being just what any design and development company can deliver to like, what, there's not a real good term for this. The term that I use is like world class design and development. And the trick to moving up that level was having more collaborative relationships with our clients, where we were more honest with each other. And what I found is, in the fixed bid, fixed scope, fixed everything relationship, you don't get those opportunities to be truly collaborative with each other.
Got it. And so do you prefer to work with startups or maybe the scale up or enterprise companies?
I personally prefer to work with both. I really like going from, something that we like literally might be launching it to a handful of people, and then turning my attention on the next project to something that's going to hundreds of thousands or millions of people and has completely different problems and all that stuff. I personally like that variety. And so we've built a company that is organized around having that variety. What I do know is that not everyone is like me. And there are definitely some people on our team that, are more equipped or like one or the other better. But I personally like the variety.
Yeah, definitely. And so how do you go about maybe RFPs? I don't know if you encounter them often, but do you have any special process for that?
We do encounter RFPs. We are very careful about whether we actually participate in them or not. And one of the reasons why is, when it comes down to it, just on our rate basis alone, we are often the most expensive company that any of our clients are talking to. And so RFPs don't really capture, many RFPs are not set up to capture who is actually best to do a project and what it's actually going to cost. They're just set up to identify the lowest cost on paper and to make that choice. But they're also a lot of work to respond to an RFP. So we win almost no RFPs that we participate in. So we're very careful about the time we spend on them. So
Right.
If we can, we try to evaluate, okay, for this client, what are their decision-making criteria and why are they doing an RFP? And if we feel like we can be successful in it, or that the opportunity is big enough where we would be, where it's worth our while to participate in it, that we will. And then beyond that, beyond the decision point of either participating or not, once we make the decision to do it, then we got to be all in on it. Because it doesn't make sense to, can I say half-ass? It doesn't make sense to half-ass something that requires so much effort, because you're just increasing the odds that you're not going to be successful in it. Um, and then so we put our full effort into doing it. We have sort of templates and that kind of thing that we use. Um, and we also like really try to, so we're doing one now actually where the client, it's a, it's with the Raleigh studio. Normally the Raleigh studio would just mostly handle everything on their own, but because it's an RFP, because it's a big dollar amount, because it's a long project, and they seem to be making decision criteria about who's going to be best to work with, not just who's going to be cheapest. We decided to participate. And so pulling the trigger on deciding to do that means that like I'm involved in that. We just got word we're going to the second round of that. So that means that I'm probably going to go there next week in order to be in person for those meetings, because it doesn't make sense to put in all the effort and then to not go all the way with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially all the enterprise companies have to go through this process, I think. So, so it's
Well,
hard
you'd
to
be
evaluate. Yeah.
surprised. You'd be surprised. Our ideal customers are, um, for the budgets that we're working on, they will have gotten to the point where they don't need to do an RFP, where they've identified the need and they've allocated the budget and
Hmm.
they've given responsibility for making a decision to an individual person. And those are our ideal clients. And even
Hmm.
at large enterprise clients, um, we've managed to identify or work with people who have been empowered that way.
Right. But I guess that's when you sort of help them with the idea from the beginning, so they can see that they really want to do this, not when they
Yeah.
are kind of deciding. Because we had the same case, but I think they have to put your company on like a short list, and you have to sign up for something. But it's not the RFP, and then the manager has to again get approval from some other person, but it's
Yeah.
still okay. So
I
yeah.
don't know if this has happened to you, but the worst is when you do that and you're building that and it seems like everything is good. And then some manager somewhere tells the person you've been working with, like, actually, we are going to have to do an RFP for this. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, now we know we're probably not going to win that.
Mm-hmm.
If their decision making criteria is just choosing the lowest cost
Yeah,
vendor.
exactly. Yeah, I like to ask for the budget if it's like an enterprise in the first meeting, like if they
Hmm.
have this in the quarter. And some managers, they have huge budgets under them, and they can
Right.
still approve these things.
Yep.
So then maybe some other question. Are majority of your clients from the States, I assume? Or do you have some?
We have the studio in London.
Mhm.
We have the other 5 studios in the U.S., and each studio works primarily with clients in its geographic region. So, the studio in London is working with clients in Europe, the Middle East, and the UK,
Mhm.
um, because it's the only international studio we have. So their reach is a
Mhm.
little bit further. But the studios in the US are primarily working like in the state or the city where they're located. Yeah.
And so, how do you then go about recruiting new, especially developers, with getting more projects? Because now you're at the point where you probably can, pick projects because your brand is known. So, how do you go about growing the company? Do you want to become like a huge software house, or do you want to stay at this size and maybe launch your own ventures, or what's the kind of vision for you moving forward?
We're very comfortable at the size that we are at, and we were very comfortable at the size we were at before. The way that we put it is, we would rather be smaller and in chart and be the kind of company we want to be than grow to the point where we're no longer the kind of company that we want to be. And so growing beyond the 20 people just in Boston, which is where we
Hmm.
started, we resisted that for a long time because we didn't know how to be bigger than that and be the kind of company we want to be. And the feelings that we had around that are what led us down the road to, rather than growing to a large team in one place, replicating what we had and what made thoughtbot special into new groups of people, was the way that we have hit upon to grow while being authentic to who we are. And that has taken us, just within the 6 cities we have, to the 115 people. And each, it sounds like a big number, but the reality is, New York is 26 people, Boston is 25, the other studios are 8 to 14 people. It's at each one of those studios, it feels very much like thoughtbot has always felt. um, so we've managed to grow to the point where we're at. We don't expect to change what makes thoughtbot thoughtbot. um, but I also at the same time have found that, like, if you're not growing, then like you're sort of I'm sure someone has said, like, if you're not growing, you're dying. Like, there is a certain aspect to always hiring new people when you can find them, and afford it, because there isn't a certain amount of growth that needs to happen to keep people excited and moving forward and that kind of thing. And so far we've been able to do that within the bounds of the studios we have. I think that we could keep on opening new studios. Our limit there is almost all of the studios have started because someone who was at thoughtbot already was moving to a new place, usually back to where they're originally from. And
Hmm.
so we would grow a studio around them. We'd support them in that move and then grow a studio around them. And so because we've grown so organically, it becomes we found it difficult to inorganically say we're going to open up a studio in this other city where we have no ties to it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny because I haven't thought about it like that. I thought because many agencies I know who are at your side, they have one big kind of
Hmm.
office, a huge office somewhere, and they just everybody's in one place. So yeah, it's a great growth process, I guess. Maybe is part of your are you still part of sales? I guess you are because you're doing the RFPs. But do you have like a huge sales team as well, or do you?
Depends on what you mean by huge. So the way that it
Oh,
works
yeah.
is each studio has a managing director, and they're the primary owner of not only the sales but the business of the studio. So that means the P&L of that
Hmm.
studio as well. And together, the 6 managing directors and me make up the sales team.
Hmm.
So it is a relatively, you know, sizable team for the size that we are, but because it maps to the studios and the way that our business runs, it feels like the right size team. And for example, there's never a question when a lead comes in or a new potential project comes in, who's supposed to be working on it, because it's very clear which studio would own that client. And
Hmm.
so we meet. I on our org chart, I feel not only there is a explicit box for VP of Sales that's separate from CEO. I fill both of those boxes right now,
Hmm.
and then we have the managing directors. And so we meet at the beginning of every week to just reflect on what's upcoming in the week and whether we need any help from anybody else on the team. Then we're collaborating with each other, reviewing each other's proposals and approaches and everything throughout the week. And then we get together at the end of every week on a call to do a agile retrospective on our work, on our sales process, that kind of thing. So we identify risks, concerns, or things to improve, and then we come up with action items for addressing them.
Right. And maybe my final question in terms of marketing or generally lead generation, is the majority of your leads coming through you from the content you produce, from the thought leadership, or is it more even outreach driven where somebody reaches out to somebody directly and maybe comes up with some insights, or maybe conference, or is it your network still? How does that go?
Yeah. So this is actually important. The majority of leads, top of the funnel, are from our content and
Hmm.
reputation. The majority of projects that we win and actually work on are word of mouth and referrals, either from past clients or past clients returning for more work. So it's interesting because I know that we wouldn't have the business we have without that reputation, because people got to become first time customers somehow in order to build the word of mouth. But on a, any snapshot in time, you look at who we're working with, and it's repeat customers, referrals, word of mouth make up the majority of them.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just doing a meetup at Microsoft, and
Mm-hmm.
That's also great because we it's like a digital innovation meetup, and we invite like these heads of digital innovation from like big
Hmm.
corporates, and it's just them, like 20 people in the room, and you share, you have like a speaker, you share some content, but you get to meet them face to face and build those relationships, and it's also cool to maybe do like an executive dinners and stuff. So I'm trying these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, we do those things as well. What we find is that they are great for maintaining relationships that will eventually turn into something.
Mhm,
Um, so, for example, and by making an invite event or having the event on a regular basis, if you're talking to a lead or you want to keep in touch with a previous client or whatever, it's a great excuse to have something on the calendar that you could reach out to people about. That, so you're not just cold reaching out and saying, like, hey, how's it
mhm.
going? And some vague thing. It's like, hey, we were running this event. It'd be great to see you there. Is a great way to keep in touch with people and to have an excuse to do it. So we do a lot of those particular kinds of events just like you do. And that's how we find that they're most valuable.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, that's great. So do you have maybe some lightweight question? Do you have any favorite entrepreneur that you follow?
Oh, um, well, what I will say is we've modeled a lot. It helped that we were following 37 Signals very early on, which is one of the reasons why we were one of the first companies to use Rails and the first consulting company to switch to Rails
Hmm.
was because and 37 Signals, for those who don't know, are the creators of Basecamp, and they've rebranded several years ago to just be Basecamp. Um, a lot of what we've done about how we work and what we believe about how products should be built and everything, um, is either coming directly from them, inspired by them, or was sort of like rose up at the same time. Like we were doing the same things as they were, and it was very fortuitous. So if there's one company or a group that stands out as someone that we look up to or follow, it's definitely them. What I will say though is I literally cannot follow uh, them on Twitter too much because of some of the controversial sort of things that happen around them. So I actually don't follow them on Twitter specifically, but
All right, so we'll not follow them as well. Uh, so so great. So thank you very much for being here. Where do you want people to go if they want to connect with you? If they're from like all those places where you have offices and they maybe are in charge of something, where can they find you online?
Best ways to do that is I am C Pytel on Twitter, CPYTEL on Twitter. My email address is chad@thoughtbot.com. I totally can get email there. And then the website's thoughtbot.com. And if you're interested in the podcast, we interview um, founders, designers, developers who are working on new things, launching new things. Um, and so that's at giantrobots.fm.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Chad, for being here. And yeah, we learned a lot. So thank you very much. And let's keep in touch.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.